Welcome, management trainees. I am your senior accountant, and I am incredibly thrilled to have you here for this explainer on corporate budgeting. Now, look, I know what you're thinking. The phrase corporate budget might make you want to instantly check your phone. But don't panic. Today, we're going to completely demystify this entire process by anchoring it to something you literally do all the time, your personal grocery shopping. Think of our agenda as your seminar syllabus today. We'll start with a welcome to corporate budgeting, move into strategy and the master budget, build the operating budget, fund the financial budget, tackle flexible budgets for reality, and finally, we'll dive into the human side of budgets. All right, Section 1, welcome to corporate budgeting. Let's ground these massive corporate concepts into that weekly chore of yours. So before you head to the store, what do? You decide what you need, right? You probably check your pantry to see what's already sitting there. Maybe you plan to keep a little extra cash or surplus food on hand for an emergency. Well, guess what? If you're doing that, congratulations, you're already budgeting. When you mentally note your pantry inventory, plan out your purchases, and prepare for the unexpected, you are implicitly preparing a purchases budget. In the corporate world, we just formalize this exact process so we can plan ahead and accurately evaluate past performance. To really succeed as new managers, there are 5 primary objectives you need to grasp from this explainer. You've got to understand budgeting's role in planning, control, and decision-making. You need to know how to prepare both the operating budget and the financial budget. You'll learn how flexible budgets aid in performance reporting, and, absolutely crucial, you need to understand the behavioral dimension of setting strict targets. But, obviously, before you hit the grocery aisles, you need a larger plan. That brings us to Section 2. Strategy and the master budget. Think about the overarching planning and execution control cycle. A 5-year strategic plan is honestly pretty useless unless it cascades down into short-term objectives. You've got a forward-looking planning phase and then a backward-looking execution and control phase. You wouldn't just wander into a massive supermarket without knowing your meal plan for the week. Similarly, a company's master budget is just the short-term, typically 1-year execution of its long-term, 5-year strategic plan. It links our big goals directly to actionable, everyday feedback. Now notice the contrast in how companies actually manage these timelines. The master budget usually covers a standard 1-year fiscal period, but proponents of continuous budgeting use a moving 12-month model. This literally forces managers to constantly add a new month to the end of the budget as the current month expires. It keeps everyone looking forward. It's kind of like continuously updating a grocery list on your fridge the exact second you run out of milk, rather than waiting for an annual pantry review. So let's see how this builds into our operations. Section 3, building the operating budget. Listen closely here because there is a very strict chronological order for establishing our income-generating supporting schedules. You absolutely cannot budget your production without a sales forecast first. It's like trying to bake a cake without knowing how many guests are showing up to the party. The sales forecast triggers the production budget, which then tells us exactly what we need for direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. All of that ultimately rolls up into our cost of goods sold and our budgeted income statement. Let's do a quick step-by-step tutorial on calculating production units because you will rely on this math constantly. Step 1, determine your expected unit sales. Got it? Okay, step 2, add the units you want in your desired ending inventory. That is your emergency snack stash. Finally, step 3, subtract the units already in your beginning inventory. That's the food already sitting in your fridge. Same logic. Getting this right is the foundation for effective corporate decision-making. All right, we've built the operating side, but eventually you have to hit the checkout counter. Section 4, funding the financial budget. Okay, huge warning right here. A very common error new managers make is confusing these two components. The stark contrast is that operating budgets dictate our income-generating activities, sales targets, production schedules, the physical stuff. Financial budgets detail the actual cash inflows and outflows required to execute those activities. You could have a highly profitable operating budget on paper, but if your financial budget shows you're out of cash, your business goes under, period. Because financing activities are completely unknown until our operating costs are nailed down, the operating budget must always feed into the financial cash budget. Here is a practical communication tip for when you are presenting budgets to stakeholders. You must emphasize that operations drive the cash needs, not the other way around. Managing the timing of that cash flow is absolutely critical, which is why the cash budget structure is totally chronological. We take our expected beginning balance, add our expected cash receipts from sales, and then subtract planned cash disbursements. Crucially, we always establish a minimum desired cash balance. Why? So that if a deficiency hits, we know exactly when we need to secure a short-term loan. Or if we have an excess, we can plan for repayments. Cash really is the lifeblood of the organization. But hey, what happens when our perfectly planned grocery trip doesn't go as predicted? Section 5. Flexible budgets for reality. Consider how we handle actual performance versus expectations. Say we originally budgeted for 1,060 units, but actual demand skyrocketed and required us to produce 1,200 units. Comparing our new raw material costs against that old static budget just isn't fair, is it? So, managers use flexible or variable budgets to compute expected costs for a range of activity levels. This lets us report actual versus expected performance fairly, adjusting benchmarks to match the reality of what happened. And notice the math on how costs behave here. The unit cost actually drops from $4.60 when producing 3,500 units, all the way down to $4.20 when producing 5,500 units. Why does that happen? Because our fixed costs are being spread out over a much greater number of units. It's exactly like buying in bulk at the grocery store to bring your per-item cost down. Understanding this cost behavior is the entire foundation of flexible budgeting. All right, let's shift gears. How does setting these strict organizational targets actually impact the human beings expected to hit them? Section 6, the human side of budgets. Budgets aren't just cold, hard numbers. They directly drive behavior. The ideal state we're striving for is goal congruence. That means aligning what the managers want with what the overall organization needs. To pull this off, top management has to recognize that people aren't just motivated by money. Yes, bonuses are great, but non-monetary incentives like increased responsibility, autonomy, frequent feedback, and highly realistic standards, those are the things that truly keep a team engaged. But you have to watch out for the dark side here. Negative behaviors like budgetary slack. You might hear this called padding the budget. It happens when a manager deliberately underestimates their expected revenues or overestimates their costs, just to make future targets super easy to hit. As your senior accountant, I'm telling you point blank, during participative budgeting, this is a highly unethical practice. It violates credibility and completely obscures the true potential of the company. On the flip side, top management can be just as guilty of ruining the process. Beware of pseudo-participation. If you, as a new leader, only pretend to involve your subordinate managers, asking for their input but secretly dictating all the non-controllable costs from the top down anyway, you are going to trigger massive dysfunctional behavior. When people figure out their input is ignored, they simply stop trying. And finally, we have myopic behavior. This is taking actions that make your budgetary performance look amazing in the short run, but bring long-term harm to the firm. Think about slashing your equipment maintenance budget just to hit your quarterly bonus, knowing full well the machines will break down next year. Overemphasizing the budget as your one and only performance measure leads straight to this kind of myopia, which is why we must always use multiple measures of performance. Which brings me to a final, incredibly important question for all of you. As a new manager stepping into this role, will your leadership style encourage transparent, ethical reporting, or will it breed dysfunctional budgetary slack? Your approach to setting standards, providing feedback, and holding people accountable will directly dictate your team's behavior. How you balance the strict numbers with that vital human element is the ultimate test. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to see how you apply these principles out there in the real world.